Over the years, a lot of people have questioned why I fish or said it's inhumane, but I've given a lot of thought to it. I don't ignore those people. And I finally feel like I've come to some conclusions on that subject. And I hope they don't sound sanctimonious, but it's important to me. It's an important topic. So, I just want to share those views because they're important to me. My first conclusion is that sport fishing is an inhumane practice. No bones about it. And to people who don't fish, especially people who are really involved or care about animal rights, this may sound really obvious, but it's a notion that I fought as an angler for many years. Fishing is my favorite thing to do on this planet, but I can't deny that it's inhumane. If I only fished for sustenance and not for catch and release, that would be survival. But I catch fish and release them intentionally, and that is causing the fish unnecessary pain just so that I can enjoy a simple pleasure, and that is inhumane. Some people have an instinctual repulsion to fishing, and I can really understand their feelings on that, but by the same token, I have an instinct to fish. It's just a part of me, probably by virtue of growing up with fishing in my life. From fishing off the dock of Elam Lodge in the Kawarthas as a young boy, just catching little sunfish and jumping for joy, to the obsession that it has become now in my life. Fishing is always something that I've associated with happiness and relaxation. The same way that I crave wilderness, camping, wildlife sightings, all of that, I have the same desire to fish. I feel that it's part of my evolutionary drive to want to learn to be self-reliant and to survive. So now, here I am with an understanding that fishing is inhumane, but with no desire to stop doing it. So now the question is, what can I do? And I think the answer to that is to minimize the amount of pain or suffering that a fish experiences by virtue of my hobby. These habits are something that have been increasingly a part of my fishing routine over the years, and I think they go hand in hand with being a mature and experienced angler. So I made a list of some things here that I think you can do to try and achieve this goal, if you care to. You can pinch barbs if you're practicing catch and release, because it just makes the release so much faster for that fish. Use tandem or single hooks instead of treble hooks. If you've got 9 hooks on a jerkbait, it's ridiculous. It's just unnecessary, and if the fish takes the back hook, where's that front hook going? Probably around its face, and you know what happens. That's not necessary. So remove some trebles, pinch some barbs. What I do often on a treble, if I keep a treble, is pinch all but one barb, and it makes releasing so much easier. Often I'm pinching all my barbs, and I think I'll continue to do that more and more. Use a rubber net, not the fabric ones. It's much gentler on the fish, and it won't scrape off their scales and or protective slime as much. Keep fish in the water once you've got them in the net for as long as possible. Well, for a short amount of time as possible in total, but keep them in the water while you're working on them and removing the hook if possible. Quick supported photo is important. You gotta support the fish. Don't just, if it's a big bass, don't just lip it. If you can possibly avoid it, support the belly, especially on the bigger fish. It's important because you can damage their internal organs if you don't. A gentle release is important as well. Don't just huck it in the water. Even if it's a small fish or a dink pike and you've caught 20 that day and you're going for walleye, treat it with respect. It deserves it. If you are releasing the fish, make sure it's stable before you do so. I think that one's obvious. But don't just, that's another reason why you don't want to just chuck it into the water, because it might not be ready to swim and it might need a little support. Dispatch fish quickly if you're going to keep them. Don't just keep them waiting. Don't leave them on the bottom of the boat to suffocate. That is particularly inhumane, as are stringers. Some people leave fish on stringers for a long time, and it's not right. Just dispatch it, eat it quickly, interrupt your day if you have to. You're killing a live animal, so I think it's the least you can do. Exposure to air is the most stressful part of for a fish for being caught, and it's not the actual hook going through it. It's just being exposed to air. It's very stressful, so minimize that time as much as possible. So to wrap up that whole rant, sloppy and inconsiderate treatment of fish really upsets me, and I think a lot of anglers feel that way, so don't do it. Not just for the anglers, but for the fish. The fish don't feel pain like you and I do, but they do suffer as a result of it, so they deserve every bit of respect you can give them. I know a lot of anglers would disagree with me on this one, but I don't believe in the use of live bait. I think raising worms and fish in a little tank and then selling them to be strung onto a hook and then fed to another creature with no possibility for escape is inhumane. If you're catching live bait from a source nearby, a local source, that's a bit different, because at least those fish got to live free and they were captured the same way that I would capture and eat a fish, which I think is better. But still, the idea of putting a metal spike through it and just dangling it down there to die when you could just use artificial lures and become a more skilled angler, I think that's a better alternative. One thing that I do take solace in is the fact that fish, as I mentioned, don't experience pain in the same way that we humans do. Their behavior when they're hooked is not pain, but just a reaction. And their nervous system and their brain are much different from ours. Fish lack the part of the brain that is responsible for consciousness and the sensations of pain. They just don't have that. A way I like to illustrate that fact to non-angling people who don't like that practice is to say that what if someone was pulling your ear or just yanking your hair, you would go with them. You would do as little as you could to resist it, and you would go in that direction. Fish, when hooked, they flail all over the place like crazy. There's no way you could argue that they feel pain the same way we do, based on that simple comparison. Fish are also used to eating other fish, spiny-rayed fish that have spiky dorsal fins, and another kind of sharp parts of their anatomy. So if they can eat those whole, then one hook in their mouth is probably something that does not feel that foreign and awful compared to what they go through every time they eat something with spikes, or crayfish, for instance. You gotta be pinching at some point. Also, there's research that shows that fish go back to feeding shortly after being hooked. So that shows, arguably, that they are not scarred by the experience. If they go back to feeding, everything's back to normal for them, presumably. However, the exposure to air that you cause when you catch them and pull them out of the water is the stressful part. So again, it's important to minimize that. So to wrap up all my yammering, despite the fact that fishing is cruel and inhumane, it's still something that brings me a lot of joy, and I still have a lot of respect for fish. And I liken that to the way I have so much respect for the forest. I revere the forest and trees, but I still use paper products. So I think there's a similarity there. People don't see living creatures the same, well, creatures with a heartbeat the same way as these creatures, but these trees are way, way older and more significant and beautiful, and they get hacked down by the hundreds of thousands, and I don't see too many people complaining about that these days, not here anyway. Maybe on a a small or a local basis, but people are generally a lot more concerned about animal abuse. Anyway, the existence of fish has provided me with some of my fondest memories in life. It has often put dinner on my plate, and I'm eternally grateful for that. I have a deep appreciation for these incredible creatures. Finally, while a lot of people consider fishing an abuse of nature, I understand their opinion on that. I feel that it's something that deepens my connection to nature. And all I can do is try to fish as humanely as possible and to try and share those practices with other anglers who I know.